Shall I begin?
Yep, you're all, everything's set.
Okay, good. Well, I want to speak on the names of Balaram and Balarama-Nam, and one of his names in particular. And in doing so, I'm going to draw from 3 different verses from the Bhagavatam. One from the 8th chapter of the 10th canto, and 2 from the 65th chapter. Quite a distance apart, but they're brought together. 65th chapter, of course, is in Dwarka, but it's, as we'll see, it's yearning in the direction of Braj, where we find the birth of Balaram. And the verse I want to begin with then is given that we're going to discuss some of his names, auspicious names, the verse in which his names are given by Gargamuni. This was arranged by Nanda Maharaj. It just so happens that the great Gargamuni was in the vicinity, a rare occasion, and Nanda Maharaj thought he had to take advantage of this opportunity to get the blessing of the Rishi, and have him oversee the auspicious namkaran, the samskar for giving the names, and in this case to both Krishna and Balaram, both of his sons, as he saw it, and appropriately so. However, of course, as you know, at the time, Kamsa was on a rampage and sending out assassins everywhere through all the villages, looking for the 8th son of Devaki, if you will, who escaped somehow, and it had been predicted that he would be the cause of Kamsa's demise. So to avert that, he was on a rampage, if you will, and so Nanda Maharaj took his 2 sons and petitioned the Garga Rishi to come to, of all places, the cowshed. So this was in the morning after the cows had already been taken out to pasture, to bring them in the cowshed, which wouldn't typically be the place to perform such a samskar, but in this way, the ceremony itself would be concealed, hidden, even from, to a large part, those in the vicinity, other extended family members, and so on and so forth. What to speak of hiding from Kamsa. So we find ourselves in the cowshed, in particular. It's mentioned in the text there, not a buffalo shed, not a chicken coop, but a cowshed. And so by way of emphasizing that it was a cowshed rather than any other type of like goat shed or a buffalo shed, for example, which are which are also members of the extended family and herd of Nanda Maharaj. Nonetheless, cows are very auspicious. I mentioned it before that some people say, how could the supreme Godhead be a cowherd? It doesn't perhaps register as well with us as it does in the Varnashram society in the time, cowherds being really kind of outback people, kind of like, to use an example from America, maybe from the Appalachians, or something, the hillbillies. So it seems very much in contrast, the Supreme Godhead to appear in such a situation. But, of course, um, cows are said to be a manifestation. Wonderful things about the nature of the cows is often offered up to um, um, explain or respond to such questions. And so in the cowshed, and while this is a humble place and in one sense not a place you can perform such a ceremony, nonetheless in another sense is quite auspicious, because where the cows stay, then God is not far from there. And there he was, two gods, Krishna and Balaram, in the cowshed. And Gargacharya was moved by Nanda Maharaj's regard for him and request, and of course by the beauty, charm of his sons as well. So there, Sri Gargovacha, we come to the verse, right? And in this verse, he is giving the names for Balaram. He says, Ayam hi Rohini Putro. This is significant to begin with, because he says this son he refers to him as Rohini Putro, which is the son of Rohini. There's an emphasis here with the word he. He, it means because this son, since this son of Rohini, or it may mean certainly the son of Rohini, he who is certainly the son of Rohini. The emphasis here is, of course, on the part of Gargamuni, and speaking to, if you will, Nanda Maharaj, as to the fact, from a point of view of bhava and substance, that Balarama is the son of Rohini. This is emphasized over the fact he's also the son of Vasudeva. That part is minimized here in the first line, for the sake of giving further assurance, if there need be any, to Nanda Maharaj that he's your son. Rohini is, of course, not the wife of Nanda Maharaj, but she's staying there and living in Braj. She's born in Braj, and the connection with Rohini is more of a connection with Braj and Nanda's family for all intents and purposes than it is a connection with Vasudeva and the Yadus, the Kshatriya dynasty, the people of the big city of Mathura, and so forth. So Gargacharya begins by, in case there would be any doubt or question in the mind of Nanda Maharaj, referring to him, this son, primarily, if you will, as the son of this Rohini, and certainly he's the son of Rohini. Let's emphasize that. He says, Ayam hi Rohini Putro Ramayan Surido Ganai Akyasyate Rama iti. So here is the first name. He says that he should be known, Akyasyate Rama. He should be known as Rama. Why? Because Ramayan Surido Gunai. Because by his gunai, by his qualities, he gives pleasure, Ramayan, primarily, Surido, to his friends. So this is with reference to the central bhava, if you will, within Balaram's Sankul Bhav. Sankul Bhav is a combination of different bhavas. In the case of Balaram, we have Sakyarasa combined with Vatsalya and Dasya. But because the Sakya rasa is prominent in Braj, and this is where he is in his fullest manifestation, then he's considered to be in Sakya rasa, augmented with Vatsalya and Dasya, which he experiences in different circumstances. So his primary sentiment is Sakya. He's kind of like the birth, with the birth of Balarama, if you will, we have the birth of friendship, of Sakya rasa. So he says, because he gives pleasure to his friends by his qualities, therefore he is known as Ram. Now, it's interesting to note that there are, of course, different Ramas. There's Parashurama, there's Dasarathi Ram, or the Ram of Sita Ram, for example. But I think we should emphasize here the fact that Ram, in the primary sense of the name, in terms of the entire manifestations of the Godhead, of which there are, which are innumerable, Sankhya, so many faces of the Godhead. I mentioned a couple other Rams, Dasarathi Ram, Parashuram. There may be others as well that don't come to my mind at the moment, but the primary Ram, this isn't the Ram of this, the Ram of that. This is Ram, Ram himself, who gives pleasure to his friends. Ram means to delight, right? Who delights his friends by his qualities. So the primary meaning, I want to say, significance of the name Ram is that it is a name for Krishna's older brother. And it's not thought like that for the most part. You hear Ram and Krishna, and people will think of Krishna and then the son of Dasarath. They'll think the son of Vasudeva, Krishna, and the son of Dasarath, Ram, of the great Valmiki Ramayana. Of course, there's a reason that they'll think like this. There's a couple of reasons. For one, it should be obvious, they think of Krishna as the son of Vasudeva, rather than as the son of Nanda. This is more typical. And because Krishna's role, if you will, as the son of Vasudeva, is the Kshatriya role, which has more overt dignity, royalty to it. In that role, he speaks the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishadic, and more characteristically and overtly, I want to say, a role for the Godhead, just like Ram in Ramayana. And for that matter, Balaram is so much the Ram as described here, who gives pleasure to his friends, and his main friend, his best friend being Krishna, that from the Gaudiya point of view, and accurately, he is primarily in that role. Although he is the Godhead, he is simultaneously an example of love of Godhead to the extreme. His services extends everywhere. We'll talk a little bit about that, hopefully. But primarily in the role of the best friend of Krishna, rather than although he is the Godhead himself, he's more in the role of a devotee of the Godhead. So he's both object of worship and example of ideal of worship that we can follow. Whereas Ram of the Valmiki Ramayana is overtly the Godhead himself, right? So when they say Ram and Krishna, then they'll think of Krishna the Kshatriya, Ram the Kshatriya, and so forth. And they may come to, oh yes, Krishna of Braj, but when it comes to Balaram, even something Balaram, he is so absorbed in the role of a servitor, of the friend of Krishna, and the servant of Krishna, that some Vaishnava Sampradayas think he must be a jiva. So we labor, of course, at times our acharyas have to dismiss that idea, but it comes out of for good reason, and we could emphasize it. We should. That he is, as Prabhupada used to say, there's the personality of Godhead served, and then there's the personality of Godhead servitor. So when Godhead wants to be the servitor, here in the Leela, he sets an extraordinary example. Such is Balaram. So the primary, now we can say, what about Radharaman? Yeah, that's Radharaman. There's Dasarathi Ram, there's Radharaman, there's Parshuram. This is Ram. Radharaman. So we can call Krishna Ram next to Radha. Yeah, he's the Ram of the Ramana of Radha, who delights Radha. That's true. So this is the first name he's given him, and it's significant. And then he said, what? Balad Hikyad Balam Vidhu. And he'll also be called Bala. This is where we get the Balaram, combining the two together. Thanks to Gargamuni, Gargacharya Ki Jai. So he says he will exhibit great strength. Now, when he speaks about his exhibiting great strength, there are, of course, some examples of this in the Braj Leela and later on as well in the Dwarka and Mathura Leela, but it's a little leaning in the direction of his Vatsalya composition, that aspect of his bhava. As I've often said, he's the older brother, and although he's only 8 days older, which is very significant, Mother Yasoda emphasized the point. He's the elder brother. You're the elder brother. You should be protecting Krishna. So this is how, of course, he'll exhibit his strength largely. And so you can argue there's an element of Vatsalya in the Bala side. But combining the two together, he's popularly known as Balaram. Sometimes Prabhupada would render it also as he who takes pleasure in giving spiritual strength to the devotees, by his example. So 2 names he's given, Ram and Bala, and then he gives a third name, and this is the name I'd like to go into in a little more depth. He says, Yadunama Pitak Bhavad Sankarshanam Ushanti Api. It says, and also he'll be called Sankarshan, because he draws together the Yadus and the Brajbasis. The Brajbasis are, in an extended sense, also Yadus, but often not thought of as such. They're Vaishya community, whereas the Yadus are largely a Kshatriya community. But this son, Sankarshana means, it means to extract. So Garga may be alluding here to some, it's not what he says overtly, but alluding to the fact that he was extracted from the womb of Devaki as the 7th child, and placed within the heat womb of Rohini at Krishna's command by Yogamaya's arrangement. He was extracted. But by the extraction, the result being that he was born as the son of Rohini, even though his father is Vasudeva, he draws together, which is what Sankarshana also means, to draw together, to bring together the Yadus of Mathura at the time and the Brajbasis, the two communities. So bringing together Vasudeva and Nanda. They are connected in a broader sense, family-wise, but he overtly emphasizes this, by way of his being extracted from the womb, this connection, brings them together. Now, Sankarshana also implies the plower, which is another way in which Balaram is depicted, often with another epithet, Haladar or Halayuda. Haladar means who bears the plow. Halayuda means who fights with has the plow as his weapon, if you will. Now, this name, Haladar, Halayuda, only appears about maybe half a dozen times in the Bhagavatam, mostly in the Dwarka Leela. There are a couple of references in the Braj Leela during the slaying of Pralamba. Is as described by Sukadeva, he's described as Haladar, although he doesn't manifest his plow there. Some acharyas have reasoned that Krishna doesn't manifest the plow in Braj, but rather his buffalo horn, whereas his plow is prominent in the Dwarka Leela, although I don't know of any Dwarka Leelas in particular that he used his plow. The name, the epithet, is invoked a few times. But the one case in which he does use his plow, that's prominent in the Bhagavatam, does happen to be in Braj, but it happens to be in Braj upon his return to Braj from Dwarka. And this is where I want to go from here in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavatam, where the names of Balarama are given. And here we're emphasizing the name Sankarshana. We're getting to a deeper meaning of it, if you will, through the epithet Haladar, which reminds us of the fact, again, that at a certain point in the Dwarka Leela, Balaram returns to Braj. And it's at that time that he uses the plow to chastise the Jamuna in the context of his reveling, if you will, in the forest, in the night, with a certain group of gopis. And that's a big story. And it's the last part and the least significant part, as important as it is, of the 65th chapter of the Bhagavatam, which we'll go to now, and which is the instance in which, in Dwarka, that, let me get to the verse here, that well, I'll get the verse later, but the instance in which Balaram expresses a desire to Krishna to return to Braj. Of course, he wants to go with Krishna, and he has been kind of pestering Krishna about it, if you will. We should return to Braj. What about the Brajbasis? And Krishna is implied in the text here that Krishna has been putting him off. And Balaram's becoming more and more frustrated. His longing to return to Braj and to pacify the residents there, the inhabitants there, his devotees there, is reached a peak. His main reason is stated in the Harivamsa, cited in some of the commentaries, the onset of the 65th chapter. Smitva gopeshu sohridam. So the primary reason that Balaram wanted to return to Vrindavan, well, it pertains to his name as Ram, as we've heard. He wanted to Smitva gopeshu sohridam. He was remembering his friendship with the gopas, and he wants to reunite with them. So this is central, of course, to Balaram's life and the lens through which we look at him from the lens to which the Goswamis look at him and highlight, if you will, for us who he is, his Sakyarasa feelings for Krishna and their friends. So this is the main reason that he wants to go, and he now apparently he's been doing this for some time, but now very strongly he starts to question Krishna. This is interesting because while, as I mentioned, Balaram's bhava is a combined bhava, although the primary bhava of those three, Vatsalya, Dasya, and Sakya, is Sakya, and therefore he's defined by Sakya. This pertains largely to Braj, because in the Dwarka Lila, the Dasya side of his Sankul Bhav becomes more prominent. So here, although this is prominent in Dwarka, the remembrance of Braj and the friendly dealings there and so forth in particular causes this to rise up in him, and in a way that would be inappropriate in a sense for Dasya Bhav, he starts to question Krishna, question his sincerity, why you're not going. I've been bringing this up politely now. As his own desire to go there increases, and his Sakya comes to the fore, then which brings equality. You don't challenge a superior, but an equal, you can challenge, question their motives and so forth. So he begins to question Krishna's motives. Does he really love the people there? How can he not go, and so on and so forth. And he gets a little heavy with Krishna, if you will. And Krishna, of course, responds, hanging his head and offering the excuse that he is in a bind because Nanda Maharaj, when he dropped him off, if you will, in Mathura, and was convinced by Vasudeva that, he should now be given an education. Kamsa is dead, now everything's safer. Now he should be sent to the Gurukul. So Nanda Maharaj couldn't argue with the logic. My son should have a good education, and he had to go back without him, if you will. Very traumatic for himself. Of course, all the Brajbasis didn't blame him, but he was kind of bamboozled by the city slickers there, Vasudeva in particular. But at the time, he told his son Krishna that you should, obey Vasudeva, be a good son now. So Krishna tells Balaram that I would like to go back, but Nanda Maharaj told me to follow the orders of Vasudeva, and Vasudeva won't let me go back. Vasudeva Devaki won't let me, so I'm in a bind. I'm following Nanda Maharaj's order, but it's Nanda Maharaj's order that causes me to have to get permission from Vasudeva, and Vasudeva won't give permission. So why don't you go and ask? See if you can get permission for me to go. So Balaram gets some hope from this, and he approaches Vasudeva and Devaki, and of course he says that I want to go with Krishna back to Braj, and they don't give him permission for Krishna to go. They deny the permission, and of course Balaram responds, "You can't give me permission and not give him permission, because the two of us are one." And he just flat out says it to them. I'm also the son of Nanda and Yashoda. So he's saying this to his father, right? This is his Braj Bhav. He couldn't contain it. He officially is actually the son from the biological, if you will, point of view, the son of Vasudeva, but in substance and bhava, he's raised by Nanda Maharaj. All his childhood, youthful, and the beginning of it, adolescent life, all this parental samskars coming from Nanda Maharaj, and this course carries him through into the rest of his life. Not that he doesn't love Vasudeva, but his parental his Vatsalya relationship with Nanda Maharaj exceeds in excellence that of his Vatsalya relationship with Vasudeva. So he just comes out and says it. Of course, the Gaudiyas will underscore this point for good reason. It's not the only time that this happens. Krishna said similar things to Vasudeva and Devaki at Kurukshetra, or he will later on, and so on and so forth. So very strong feelings, the point is here, on the part of Balaram for Braj. And so Balaram returns then to Krishna and explains that he didn't get permission, but he asks Krishna's permission nonetheless. So his Dasya Bhav comes to the fore again, and he asks Krishna's permission. He won't go without Krishna's permission. And Krishna responds to him by addressing his Sakyaras sentiments. He responds to him with trying to make a little bit light of the situation. He reminds him of his cowherd leelas and of Gopastami, and how you remember how I praised you when we first got out and were able to herd cows in front of all the other cowherds. The things I said about you. He said it in Hasirasa. There's a beautiful eulogy of Balaram on the part of Krishna, which he gives ostensibly, you could say, for the purpose of strengthening the resolve or the faith of all the cowards and the confidence of Balaram, which on a daily basis he would leave with Balaram, while he himself and a few Narmasakas would go off to Radhakunda on the excuse of doing something else. So anyway, the praise of Balaram, he reminds him of such days and times, and the joking, and so in the context of doing that, in his eulogy of Balaram, he ends with and you're special, especially because all the gopis, they love you. This is something that Balaram doesn't really listen to, but Krishna reminded him of that. And then he reminds him also of that night during the holy celebrations where some young gopis fell in love with Balaram, which also he didn't take very seriously. It's not something, this romanticism, if you will, that is central to Balaram's sentiment, his thoughts, and so forth, but it's very central to Krishna's, as we know. And so Krishna reminds Balaram of this aspect of himself, and as a result, of course, he encourages Ram, said you should go see your friends and everything, but when you're there, it's the Madhurya Bhav in Krishna's coming to the fore, and he's thinking about Balaram's gopis and how they feel towards Balaram, and then tells Balaram, and you should marry them, tender to them. They've been waiting for you all this time. It's not something that Balaram even replies to. Instead, what really strikes Balaram at this point in their conversation is that Krishna does not say anything about his own gopis, and it brings tears to Balaram's eyes, and he walks away. You're giving me permission to go. You're reminding him of my friends, and so on and so forth. You're joking with me about my gopis, and so forth. But in his heart, he thinks about Krishna, who he's the servitor of, right? Who he's the best friend of, who he knows loves the gopis This is the Krishna's own gopis, Radha and other such gopis. There's different sets of gopis, right? Balaram's gopis are not Krishna's gopis. But Krishna hasn't said anything directly about them. So he walks away from the conversation weeping. And then Krishna turns to Uddhava, who he had sent earlier to Braj to pacify the residents, who had conversations with the gopis, delivered his messages to the gopis, learned something about Gopi Bhav there, and was awed by it. He talks to Uddhava, and then he gives a message. He writes down from his heart a message, gives it to Uddhava and says, give this to Balaram to give to the gopis. He doesn't tell him directly. Give this to Balaram to give to the gopis. So Balaram has a mission now for Krishna. He's going there to, Krishna tells him, you love Braj more than I do. It means that the inhabitants of Braj, they're more attached to Vrindavan than Krishna is. After all, Krishna left. Balaram left, but he couldn't stay away. He had to go back. So he's referring to him when he says, you love Braj more than I do, as in terms of his being a Braj Bhakta, more than as Bhagawan, who has other obligations, like establishing Dharma and so forth. So he gives him this. He gives him the message, and he sends him on his way. He tells him that you should dress like a gopa, get out of this fancy, royal attire as a prince. Dress it, otherwise it'll be awkward. And in return, so Balaram does so. He puts on the gopa vesh, and of course, when he arrives in Braj, the first thing that he does is he goes to his parents' house, and they greet him, and with great joy, they ask about his activities, his leelas in Dwarka, those of Krishna. He bathes, he eats, he sits with them, answers questions, and so on and so forth. Nanda Maharaj hears about the slaying of this demon and that demon, and he marvels at how Krishna has protected Vasudeva and Devaki and all these extended relatives of ourselves and so forth with such effort, but which they might have died, without the valor that Krishna displays in Mathura and later in Dwarka. But he also makes the point that with great effort, he did this to protect them and save their lives. Maybe he would just come here and save our lives. All he has to do is come here and save our lives. We're dying without him. This is a very extraordinary encounter. Balaram is there, right? And this is overwhelmingly joyful for the inhabitants of Braj, but at the same time, Krishna is not there. So it's this is very peculiar. The feelings that arise, the joy that arises, and then the separation from Krishna that it intensifies in the presence of Balaram as well. So Balaram is dealing with a very difficult type of situation there to pacify them, and he has his own feelings. The next day, of course, in the morning, he goes to be with his friends. He visits the house of each and every friend, holds hands with them, embraces them. They remember their pastimes together. And of course, they begin to ask about Krishna. And they say, will you bring him back? We've been here all this time, but we haven't been able to go out once cow herding. We're just sitting here. And Balaram starts to experience the same thing. I'm here in Braj, but without Krishna being here, I can't find the enthusiasm to go out and herd cows and play in the forest. He starts to merge into the same feelings that the cowherd boys themselves are feeling. So this is a great time of celebration that Ram is present. And they're heralding it, and it means everything to them. The praise that they give the inhabitants of Braj to Balaram, there's no more. He can be praised from different angles of vision by different devotees, but the praise of the Braj Vasis of Balaram for returning, this is like the lotus in the river of Ram's fame. This is just the high point, if you will, what he has done to come back and feel there. And in other words, Uddhava went there, but Uddhava doesn't have the feelings of a Brajbasi. He's not a Brajbasi. He is in Dasyabhav, and there's a touch of Sakyabhav in him. So when he goes to Braj, that Sakyabhav can come to the fore. He can experience some pranay, but it's limited comparatively. So he was there learning, experiencing that anew, for the first time, the fullest measure of his own emotional constitution. But there's a gulf of difference between his ability to identify with the Brajbasis and Balarams. Ram is a Brajbasi. So they're in their own mood. He knows exactly how they're feeling, and he's feeling it himself. Now he's in Braj and Krishna is absent. So he's in such a great position, in one sense, to empathize, because he doesn't have to sit on the couch and try to enter into to the experience of the patient so that he can empathize with them. He is feeling the experience full on, even more so than all of them. So he's in a perfect position to empathize with them, but it's not an easy thing to situation to deal with. It's glorious, it's wonderful, but it's sad at the same time. And then, of course, after visiting with his friends, expressing himself, as I mentioned, he has to meet with the gopis. Right. So this is now where we come again to this epithet of Sankarshan. Sankarshan, we've given different meanings for the name and how it applies to Balaram. I should mention in this regard also that Sankarshan is epithet of Balaram that's more prominent in Mathura and Dwarka. In fact, there are ancient coins, but on one side is Vasudeva and the other side is Sankarshan. So you're not, it's the royalty that's coining whatever, silver or gold at the time. So the name Sankarshan is, as I say, prominent in Balaram's Kshatriya princely Leela and Vasudeva. Vasudeva, Sankarshan, instead of Krishna and Ram, names that are more relevant, Govinda Ram to Braj. Vasudeva and Sankarshan, these are printed on the coins. They were royal princes and so forth. We find from the Gaudiya terminology that Balaram is the Vaibhav Prakash of Krishna, the only one in Braj. From there, Krishna and Balaram expand to Mathura and Dwarka. Vasudeva Krishna is the Vaibhav Prakash of Krishna in Mathura, but Balaram in Mathura is the Prabhava Vilas of Balaram. He's called Sankarshan. Sometimes the Gaudiya refer to him as the Mool Sankarshan, right? And then he expands in Dwarka, in Vaikuntha as Mahasankarshan. And this Mahasankarshan expands into the world as the first avatar, as Mahavishnu. So this is a big name, Sankarshan. It's a big name. As we look at it, it's often, and probably more often than not, used in terms of the Aishvarya, the godhood, the majesty of Balaram. But here now the name comes in reference to the Leela that we're discussing. Krishna, Balaram returning to Braj, and now in particular at this time, giving a message to the gopis. He meets with the gopis. And I want to go to that verse. This is significant. And then we'll come to the verse in which this name Sankarshana is invoked. Gopyo hasyanta paprachchu Rama-Sankarshana Kaschid aste sukam Krishna Purastri Janabalava. So Balaram's now, Sankarshan Balaram, Ram, meeting with Krishna's gopis. Gopyo hasyanta paprachchu. So the gopis, they greet him. This is Dauji, the elder brother of Krishna. And they are smiling, hasyanta, and they inquire from him. They're kind of laughing and inquiring. And Rama Sandarshanadrita, they're showing respect. Sandarshanadrita means that they're showing respect and honoring, if you will, Balaram. That's typical of the Braj Leela. He's the elder brother of their lover. But here, this smiling of the gopis, this laughing and inquiring in them is superficial. They're putting up a good face. They're smiling in front of Krishna's elder brother. They're going to speak about Krishna, ask about him, but they're filled with feelings of separation and doubts about Krishna's love for them. Their situation is pitiful. So they're not really happy. They're happy to see Balaram, but they're thinking about Krishna and they're feeling pains of separation, and they're trying to visibly hide that, if you will, by putting on a smile and showing respect for Balaram. But here now the words Rama Sandarshanadrita. So Ram, they honored Ram. This is overt meaning. But acharyas have also drawn out just the opposite, that Balaram, Ram, at the same time is honoring them. He sees what's going on. He sees their body language, if you will, and he understands their hearts. And what he's seeing, of course, is their attempt to, as I say, hide or cover their intense feelings, which constitute Mahabhav. Balaram is seeing their Mahabhav. This is not something that's typically relative to Vatsalya Rasa. He just tended to the elders. Sakya Rasa, although in certain instances, those Narmasakas, they taste Mahabhav. Typically, that's not the case with the greater group of cowherd boys. This is something for the gopis, Mahabhav. Radharani's Mahabhav Surupani, the full face of that. Balaram now is directly speaking with them about their love for Krishna, something that's not typical in the Braj Leela, right? It's not something they're going to talk about with Balaram. Not that he doesn't know about it, but he certainly doesn't report it to Mother Yasoda like he did when Krishna ate dirt. So he approves of it by not reporting on it, but he's now directly speaking with them about it, not something that's typical of the Braj Leela, and doing so on behalf of Krishna. And he is seeing their Mahabhav and Rama Sandarshanadrita. He is, while they're honoring him, he is honoring their Mahabhav. This reminds us, of course, of when Nityananda Prabhu saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Bhava of Radha, manifesting Mahabhav during the Ratha Yatra in Jagannath Puri. Big Jagannath on the chariot, the prince, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu a simple ascetic, if you will, a sannyasin, not in royal attire by any means, and dancing and singing in front of the Rath cart, and he begins to exhibit the feelings of Radharani, and Jagannath's cart stops. He becomes stunned by that, right? And Nityananda Prabhu, from a distance, described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he sees Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Radha in Mahabhav. And what does Nityananda Prabhu do at that time? Does he say, I think I will taste Mahabhav too? No, he doesn't say that at all. He bows down. He gets down and pays pranams, dandavat pranam, at a distance to Radha's Mahabhav. There's the same feelings now that are coming in Balarama at this time. He's awed by their Mahabhav. And now he's in this extraordinary circumstance to experience it firsthand and to tender to it by way of conveying, delivering the message of Krishna. Kaschid sukham Krishna, purastri jana Baladeva. So in their joking, if you will, or in their attempt, I should say, to cover their bhav, they ask, so by the way, how is Krishna? How's your brother doing? Overtly, they think Balaram doesn't know about their earlier rendezvous. He's not involved in that. Should he come near, they hide it that much more, right? Because he's an elder. Their relationship with Balaram is a relationship of Vatsalya. So they have respect. He's the elder brother of their lover, their illicit lover, if you will. So they think that Balaram doesn't even know about their love, or they question that. So they say, how's your brother doing? Anyway, Kaschid sukham Krishna, purastri jana Baladeva. He must be happy living there. We heard that he married these Srijana Baladeva, that he's the darling of the ladies there. He's a real ladies' man. He's got many wives amongst the queens. How auspicious for him. You can imagine saying this, how they're feeling inside. And Balaram, I mean, he knows what's going on. He's experiencing this firsthand, right? So with great regard for their Mahabhav, and then he now takes up. This goes on for, of course, a few verses. First section of this chapter is a description of Balaram meeting with the friends, meeting with the parents, and so forth. And then the second part now, meeting with the gopis, Krishna's gopis, right? So this is the beginning of that. The gopis go on to speak further and show the symptoms of Mahabhav, and Balaram hears them out, of course. And then Sankarshana sta Krishnasya sandasya hridayam gamai santavyam asa bhagavan nanu naya kovida. So then the epithet Sankarshan is invoked, and this now is the instance in which this name is can be understood in a Madhurya context. I don't mean Madhurya Rasa, but I mean rather than Aishvarya, which is often the context in which the name Sankarshan is used, as I mentioned, extending to Haladar, bearing the plow, as a weapon, and the Mahasankarshan, the Mool Sankarshan, Mahavishnu, who's Sankarshan, and so forth. Again, Balaram as a prince, and so forth, drawing the Sampradayas, or the Kurus and the Brajbas, or the Yadus and the Brajbasis together, and so forth. A little bit of more affectionate in that, but now Sankarshana ta Krishnasya Sandeshaya Hridayam Gomai. So the Sankarshan, he's described here as Nana Nunaya Kovida Santavyam Aso Bhagavan, with great expertise at offering consolation. He consoles the gopis by Sandaisha Hridayam Gamai, by expressing the heart message of Krishna. He delivers the heart message of Krishna, assures them how Krishna feels for them, and he does it with great expertise that by which he's successful in pacifying them on the one hand by his own expertise, aided, if you will, by the way in which the message itself is worded by Krishna, which is very consoling to the gopis. So it's the way in which Krishna expresses the message more clearly, if you will, than he did in his message through Uddhava, which Uddhava completely misunderstood. When the gopis heard it, they said, I don't think that's, this is what is meant there, right? This is what he's saying. And when they repeated what they thought he was saying, Uddhava became enlightened. So that's what he's saying. I thought he was just giving a message, hey, look, things happen, people get separated, by the arrangement of providence. What can we do? We should not lament. Basic teachings of Bhagavad Gita. But the gopis drew out much deeper meaning from what Krishna was saying. When they repeated it back, this has caused Uddhava's enlightenment, right? So here the message is straightforward. It's not couched, and it doesn't have another intention in it. In his message to the gopis through Uddhava, the intention was to convey his heart feelings to the gopis, but also to bring about the enlightenment of Uddhava at the through the response and siksha, if you will, of the gopis. This isn't necessary for Balaram. Again, he's a Brajabasi. He knows about these affairs. He wept when Krishna told him to return, mentioned his friends and parents and so forth, didn't say anything about the gopis. He knows how Krishna's feeling towards them. He doesn't have an opportunity directly in the Braj Leela to participate in that, like a Narmasaka. But now the opportunity arises. This is a special occasion for Balaram, Sankarshana. Here he's referred to as Sankarshana because what he's doing is he is uniting the gopis with Krishna. He's bringing them together. And representing Krishna so fully that they're actually that they gain confidence, that Krishna will return confidence in his words that they couldn't draw to the same extent from Uddhava when Krishna sent him with a message. Sankarshanas ta Krishna Sandaisha Hridayam Gamai. It's said that Balaram so well represented Krishna to them that his complexion changed colors from white to black, if you will. And there are a couple of deities in the Braj of Balaram that are black. They're supposed to be representing this extraordinary moment, where the full term idea, the sweet idea of the implication, I should say, of the name Sankarshana is found. Krishna actually drew Krishna there. Balaram actually drew Krishna there. He was present. Krishna had told Balaram, speak to them. If you can't pacify them, I'll appear as in a sporty there, in like a hallucination. I'll manifest myself. Of course, he's already done that in the past, and that's not sufficient for them. They doubt those sporties of Krishna, if it's actually Krishna. But it wasn't necessary. Neither would it have worked. Balaram was able to fully represent Krishna's heart and feelings for them, and gave them a kind of confidence which enabled them to move on to another subject. And the next subject is what? Gopis bring up to him how grateful they are how much love they have for Balaram by way of his representing Krishna. Balaram is often identified with Guru Tattva, so representing Krishna. This is the idea. He fully represents Krishna. Krishna's present there in him. They feel his presence. Now, more so than any time since Krishna has departed. Enough to calm down, if you will, and feel confidence in Krishna's love for them, and now move to another subject, which now is the last part of this this chapter 65 of the 10th canto. What do? They ask him that we're very pleased with how you've delivered the message and so forth. Now something else comes to our mind. There are some gopis here who fell in love with you during Holi. So they bring up these gopis. And they've been waiting for you this whole time. And therefore, you're here. You should tender to them. You should marry them. This is not on Balaram's mind. What's on his mind is representing Krishna, serving Krishna, being the best friend of Krishna. What is that? Guru Pakari Smrtida Priyanam. Krishna says the best friend is one who reminds one of their beloved. Here he's reminding the gopis of their beloved in a way that makes them feel he's present there amongst them. So now they're asking him, you should tender to these gopis. Now, Balaram, of course, will do that, but it's not central to his bhav. So he says, well, yeah, okay, but I need to get, permission from Nanda Maharaj and so forth. And so he kind of puts it off. It's brought up. He gets the permission and so forth. And then while in Vrindavan for the remaining period, he has at Ramghat, he meets with the gopis and has like a Gandharva marriage. Of course, it's done with the blessing of Nanda Maharaj. And so it's not the kind of parakia we find with in Krishna's relationship with his gopis. It's different. And in the context of that, of course, Balaram's drinking the Varuni beverage, and he makes the gopis drink it as well. And then he wants to bathe in the Jamuna, and she says, "You're, drunk. Why should I respond to you?" And then he brings out his plow. So here comes the Haldar, and this is the famous instance, as I say in Braj, where he actually used the plow. The only one that I know of in the whole of the Bhagavatam where he actually uses the plow as a weapon of sorts here to chastise the Jamuna. And she, of course, bows to him and so forth. And he bathes with the gopis, his own gopis, in the Jamuna. And in the context of this, he marries the gopis, and this side of his life then is completed. But it's a side of his life, as we can see from the chapter, that's kind of an afterthought, if you will, in terms of his main primary preoccupation involved. And that is the focus of that we get Balaram through the Goswami. So how much we are indebted for them to sorting this out for us as to who Balaram really is. Krishna, personality of Godhead served, and Balaram, Sankarshana, personality of Godhead servitor. Shri Sankarshan ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Hari Bol. Any question? Yes, we're out of time. Ganga Shakti has a question. Yes.
Oh, I think someone else started speaking also.
Well, you beat him to it. You override. Go ahead.
My question is in relation to what kind of the understanding in Vrindavan as of Krishna and Balaram's parentage, because you often point out that in Vrindavan they don't see Krishna as the son of Vasudev and Devaki, but as the son of Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda. But at the same time, from my understanding, in Vrindavan, they see Balarama as the son of Vasudeva and Rohini. And I was wondering, of course, you said today that Balaram himself sees himself more as the son of Nanda, which obviously makes him the brother of Krishna. But I got a bit confused with how the understanding in Vrindavan is in regard to their parentage, and why do they call them brothers if they don't see Krishna as a son of Vasudeva, but they do see Balaram as a son of Vasudeva, or if I'm getting it wrong somewhere.
It's like if someone, if I have a son and the son is disobedient, and has a reputation for such in the community, but the neighbor's son develops a relationship with me, and he always comes over, cuts the lawn, and does all kinds of things for me. The neighbors will say, "He's your son. He's your son. This is actually your son." So the blood relationship, this is a trivial thing. What are the feelings? Sometimes they correspond, but with the cases in which they don't, then the feelings prevail. Nanda Maharaj, Balaram grew up, and for all intents and purposes, as the son of Nanda Maharaj. He's the father figure entirely in Balaram's whole life up until his adolescence, right? Which is a time where you leave your parents. So by the time he returns to Mathura, if you will, and has a relationship with Vasudeva and Devaki, he's already out of the house. Right? He gets there, he goes to Gurukul, and off he is as a prince and so forth. So his whole experience in his childhood of who his father figure in his life is Balaram, is Nanda Maharaj, and everybody else accepts that. So in substance, they see him, and accurately so, as the son. And you're talking about a village situation here where cousins are brothers and sisters, and there's more than one mother. Everybody's a mother. For Yasoda is the mother of every cowherd boy, knows every preparation, every cowherd boy's favorite preparation, exactly what they like the most. She gets a chance to see them separately. She'll grab them, bring them on her lap immediately, ask him questions about Krishna, sit him down, feed him. So, despite the fact that he has another mother, so it's not as odd if you understand the context of the village life and so forth. Just like at Madhavan, I remember realizing at some point, practically everybody in this area, Juan, who just retired, worked for us there, everybody's his family. This is his cousin, this is his second cousin, this is his third cousin, this is his aunt, uncle, nephew. It's practically for a large radius around Madhavan, it's all extended family members of Juan. And even if they're in another family, technically speaking, how they live together is as if it's part of the same family. So think of it along those lines. It may be helpful. Anything else?
Nandavat Guru Maharaj.
Yeah.
You said that Balaram's romantic involvement with his gopis is not such an important thing for him or for us. But Vrindavan does. He starts his whole Chaitanya Bhagavat with this very Leela.
Right. Yes. He emphasizes that Nityananda Prabhu was Balaram himself, and Balaram has a Rasa Leela, he says, right? So Krishna is famous for having a Rasa Leela. This is the Maharas, right? The Maharas. He's famous for this. And from the Braj or Gaudiya perspective, this is the fullest evidence of his godhood, actually. He's the king of rasas, right? tasting this. So now that is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's position, right? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself. Now the position of Balaram, as I said, even Vaishnava Sampradayas, some of the questions, Balarama Jiva, it's not as clear because of his disposition as a servitor. And when we come to Gaudiya Sampradaya, then we have Nityananda Prabhu. Obviously, he's misunderstood. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu labored repeatedly to point out the position of Nityananda Prabhu to his own intimate associates. He was unorthodox in his behavior and so forth, and completely dedicated to the service of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but he is God himself. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu repeatedly tried to point this out. I referred earlier in the talk to the eulogy of Balaram on the part of Krishna in the 15th chapter, as the Purganda Lila begins. Krishna is laboring there also in the Bhagavatam to establish the position of Balaram, that he's also God. So it's an issue. So I believe that Vrindavan Das Thakur is trying to do the same thing there. And he's using this technique by speaking about, so Krishna, Balaram also has a Rasa Lila. Therefore, he should be seen also as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He mentions it, like, doesn't go into detail about it and so forth and so on, but he emphasizes it for that purpose only. But if you look at the two, of course, with great detail, there's a huge difference between the two events. Balaram, as I said, shows Aishvarya by manifesting his plow and dragging the Jamuna, this extraordinary godly kind of display in the midst of his so-called Rasa Lila, which is not happening during Krishna's Rasa Lila with the gopis by any stretch. It's completely Madhurya, sweet, right? And of course, it's done with the permission of Nanda Maharaj and at the behest of the other gopis and so on and so forth. And it is, if you look at the chapter, his reason for going, he has to be reminded by Krishna, asked by Krishna to tender to the gopis. It's something he forgets about practically. The gopis then remind him of this, and still then he asks Balaram. He says he has to get Nanda Maharaj's permission, and so forth. So it's quite different. Also, the holy festival where the gopis fall in love with Balaram, that's completely different also than the Rasa Lila. Other cowherd boys are there. They're all playing at Holi. It's a perfectly licensed, if you will, thing to do at Holi for boys and girls to get together and throw colors and so on and so forth. If something else was going on a little bit underneath, well, that's there, but it's quite different, if you will, than the Rasa Lila. And this is just 1/3 of one chapter of the Bhagavatam that it's dealt with. In the instance of Balaram's returning, the central part of which is to meet his friends, the parent, and to minister to the gopis, ultimately. So if you look at it broadly, the fact that Vrindavan Das is emphasizing that has to be looked at in light of that. So that's how I have always thought of it, by invoking or by emphasizing, underscoring. Balarama also has a Rasa Lila. It's a way of saying those who have identified Krishna as Rasaraj because of the Rasa Lila, they should also see him as a supreme Godhead, something like that. Does that help?
Thank you. Yes.
Jai. Balaram Rasa Lila ki jai. Haribol. Yes.
Does anyone else have a question?
They did not return with him. No, they stayed there. Yeah. It's not mentioned in the Bhagavatam per se, but he returned without them. And that's another point, of course. I brought it up in one of my chapters of my book. We don't even know their names. primarily, of course, Balaram is known for his married relationship with Rebati. And that is something with Aishvarya. And it's mentioned also in other places, in other texts, that the gopis who fell in love with Balaram, they were sadhana siddhas. In the previous life, they worshipped Balaram and Rebati. So their approach is not a rag marg from a Gaudiya perspective approach to living in the Braj. Therefore, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur calls their rapport with Balaram Maryada. It's another name for Vaidhi rather than rag. So it's another way in which we can underscore the central focus of Balaram being his Sakyaras with Krishna. They were said to be those gopis in the previous life from the Naga community, which Balaram and Anandasesha are identified with. And there is a group of devotees in Braj that worship Balaram and give preference to Balaram over Krishna. And they worship Balaram and Rebati Ram, which again is a Dwarka relationship. So no, there's not much said about those gopis. Nothing afterwards. Nothing. There's just that one chapter there, and then there's the holy chapter where you could draw it out. The only person that's really tried to draw out more that I've seen out of that holy encounter is Kavi Karnapur, and he does mention one gopi's name, but it's the only place that gopi's ever been named amongst them, a leader amongst them, nowhere else. So again, the text itself does not give that much emphasis to that side of Balaram's life. It is a side, it is important, we bow down to it, but it's not the center of Balaram's life, so it's not the center of our life in terms of how we focus on Sankarshana. Does that help? Haribo Jai. How is Sumati? Oh, good. Your festival starts today? Balaram Jayanti. All right, anything else? Nice to be with you. With their permission, then I'll take your leave. I'm going to go and cook a little something, pick something from the garden and cook for Balaram. Krishna Balaram ki jai, Gaur Nityananda ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanand. Hari Bol.